Hey everybody, so it's Sunday morning, which means it's time for NHL Games of the Week, where I look ahead to the upcoming week in the NHL and pick out which games I think are the best games on the schedule for this week. And it's funny how this week turned out. It's basically, there's really, looking at the schedule, one marquee game per day until we get to Saturday, which has a few really, really good matchups. But let's get right into it, starting with today. October 20th, we have Calgary versus Anaheim tonight. Divisional matchup, two teams that at times really don't like each other. Anaheim's off to a pretty good start this season. Calgary kind of a little slow out of the gate, right around 500 to start the season. Just the divisional matchup, and I think just the way that these two teams play each other at times is really fun to watch. So Anaheim versus Calgary tonight should really be a good one. Moving on to tomorrow, the 21st, we have Colorado versus St. Louis. I mean, you have the defending Stanley Cup champions versus one of the hottest teams to start the season. A team in Colorado that's really looking to take that next step forward and go from a playoff team to an elite team. And Colorado with one of the most hyped up teams before this season started, given their roster. That should be a really, really fun Central Division matchup. I think those teams are really going to go at it. That's an important game, even though it's early in the season, and it should be a whole lot of fun to watch. Tuesday, the 22nd, Toronto versus Boston. Toronto Bruins and Maple Leafs play again. They played last night. Toronto won in overtime. Now they play in Boston Tuesday night. I don't really need to talk a whole lot about this matchup, I don't think. If you're a hockey fan, you know. Toronto and Boston is a game of the week every single time they play. Huge rivalry between the teams. Playoff matchups each of the past 2 years. Potentially a playoff matchup again this year. It's Boston versus Toronto. It's as good as it gets in the NHL right now. Then we have Wednesday, the 23rd, Pittsburgh versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. This is a really fun matchup between two very good teams in the Eastern Conference. Pittsburgh dealing with a lot of injuries, but overcoming those injuries and still winning a good number of games. Tampa Bay, not so great out of the gate. Kind of a slow start for the Lightning. I expected more from them at the beginning of this season. I thought they were going to come out firing after everything that happened in the playoffs, getting swept last year. Not an impressive start for the Lightning, but they've got a really good home matchup against a good team in Pittsburgh, which I think is going to be a lot of fun to watch. When those two teams played last year, those games got really nasty. There's definitely, even though they're not in the same division, there is some bad blood between the Lightning and Penguins. That game is Wednesday night, which means I'm probably going to be streaming that game. So right now I plan on streaming that, and that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Thursday, October 24th, we have Minnesota versus Nashville. Now, obviously, Minnesota's not very good. They're one of the worst teams in the league. And they're playing a very difficult opponent and a very good team in the Nashville Predators. But it's a divisional matchup in the Central Division where those teams play each other very, very hard. And even though Minnesota's not very good, they will always pick their game up when they play an opponent like Nashville, who's in that division. And man, that Central Division is just such a war. And when those teams play each other, I mean, it is a battle night in and night out. So I still, even though the Wild aren't great this season, I think that's going to be a good game. And I think it's going to be fun to watch. And Nashville's probably going to win it, yes. But it should be an exciting one to watch. And there should be some heated moments between those two teams for sure. Then we go to Friday, the 25th, and we have Colorado versus Vegas, two of the top teams in the Western Conference. Very, very talented teams, a lot of offense, probably going to be a pretty high-scoring game. Colorado, obviously, with McKinnon and Rantanen and Makar, Sam Girard, Eric Johnson, Nazem Kadri, Gabe Landeskog. The talent on Colorado is phenomenal this year. And then Vegas with their top six, Pacioretty, Carlson, Stastny, Jonathan Marchessault, Mark Stone, I could just keep going on and on and on with these teams and the talent that these two teams have. That's going to be a high-flying, really, really fun game to watch. And I think that will be one of the best games this week, without a doubt. And then we get to Saturday the 26th, and there's a number of really good games on Saturday. St. Louis versus Boston at 7 p.m., Stanley Cup Final rematch. Anytime that the teams who played in the Stanley Cup Final play for the first time the next season, that's a game of the week in my mind. And Boston and St. Louis are going to meet for the first time on Saturday, and that should be a really fun game to watch. A really good matchup, two very good teams. And it's in Boston, which is where the Blues won the Stanley Cup in Game 7 last year, was in Boston on Bruins ice. So St. Louis returns to where they first hoisted the cup. Boston looking to avenge that loss in Game 7 last year. And obviously a regular season game in October is a whole lot different from Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. But it would be nice for the Bruins to get a win over a team like St. Louis. Then we have Toronto versus Montreal. Obviously huge rivalry there. Division rivalry, Canadian rivalry, original six rivalry. It's Maple Leafs Canadians. It's a very, very good matchup every time they play, and that should be a really fun game to watch. And then finally, the Heritage Classic between Calgary and Winnipeg is on Saturday night, and that's a huge thing in Canada. If you're here in the U.S., it's not as big of a thing. But the game, it will be on NBCSN, so it is televised here in the U.S., and we're able to watch it. And Calgary and Winnipeg, that's a pretty darn good matchup between Western Conference Canadian teams. Both teams are around 500 to start this year, so getting a win in that game would obviously be big for the record. It also is the Heritage Classic, so it would be big for in general. So that should be a fun game to watch between two teams that really could use the win in a big game like that. So overall, pretty much it's one per night this week, which is funny because that's not how I, always do this series or anything. But just the way that it turned out, it's basically one per night until Saturday, where there's a few really good matchups. But overall, a decent week coming up in the NHL. Definitely some good games to watch. And hopefully you get a chance to watch some of these matchups. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the comment or the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.